The ongoing drama and turmoil of today's rapidly changing events captures our attention and overshadows almost everything else in our lives. So the world still knows little about the most important story in all of human history, or perhaps the most enormous hoax unfolding right now in a small Swiss village. In order to decide which one it is, history or hoax, we must be able to clearly distinguish between speculation and facts. We must also be able to distinguish between beliefs and knowledge. Would you want to travel on an airplane piloted by someone who believes that they can fly it, or someone who knows how to fly it? Truth and knowledge supersede belief. We are about to leave behind the age of beliefs and enter the age of knowledge. So you will not be asked to believe anything here, but to only consider the facts in order to discover the truth. And while what you learn may amaze, inspire, even scare or anger you, I simply ask that you keep an open but critical mind and draw your own conclusions only after you have reviewed all of it. As you will see, this information is actually an urgent call for you and I to take action concerning our future and our very survival. At the end of this presentation, there are 3 questions that I will ask you. First, is this true? Second, what do I do about it? Third, what do we do about it together? In order for us to answer these questions, we'll be considering the following question throughout the presentation. What is the evidence that this is true? Born Edward Albert Meyer in Bulach, Switzerland, on February 3, 1937, Meyer claims that his voluntary face-to-face contacts with extraterrestrial humans, referred to as Plejarians or Pleiadians, began when he was only 5 years old. His life has been one of great difficulties, with attacks of all kinds on his character, his truthfulness, and even his life itself. In the course of his life, Meyer has traveled widely, during which time he acquired his nickname, Billy, and he has had an uncommonly large number of diverse occupations. He is primarily self-educated, with great assistance from the Plejarians. The extraterrestrials, the Plejarians, claim to be both space and time travelers who have come here on what they call a self-obligated mission to assist us in rectifying still lingering damage done to humanity by their own distant forefathers, who represented themselves as gods or deities to our early ancestors. Additionally, they wish to assist us, albeit indirectly, in averting our own self-destruction. While they operate completely outside the constraints of all terrestrial, governmental, or military powers, they do adhere to a strict policy of non-interference in our affairs. They will not land publicly, nor will they interact with anyone except Meyer, despite any claims to the contrary. The UFOs are certainly the most controversial, dazzling, and phenomenal aspect of the Billy Meyer UFO contacts, but they are by no means the most important. In the same way that the story of Columbus is not really about the Nina, Pinta, and the Santa Maria, but about the events and impact of Columbus's arrival, the Billy Meyer UFO contacts, ongoing for over 61 years, are also not really about the ships they came in, but rather the information provided by the Plejarians and its impact on and meaning to us. Billy Meyer's case is unique in that he has presented for scientific examination an unprecedented volume of physical evidence of the absolutely highest quality. He was given or produced this evidence between 1975 and 1980, many years prior to the availability of the kinds of technology like computers, synthesizers, and digital effects or Photoshop that would have allowed him to hoax it. Meyer presented the physical evidence to the lead investigator in the case, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, United States Air Force, retired, who headed the team which spent 6 years researching and investigating the case at their own expense. Stevens is one of the most renowned researchers of UFOs and unexplained phenomenon in the world. Here you see one of Mr. Meyer's 8mm movie segments of a UFO taken in 1978. Notice the two separate lights that momentarily flash on the cupola and the flanging of the ship. Mr. Meyer and his wife recorded the sounds you are hearing in 1980 on a cassette machine, outdoors with 15 witnesses present. Here is a video segment from 1981 of one of the most unusual UFOs ever seen, photographed, or filmed. If there's any doubt that the object is indeed a large unknown craft of some sort, watch as Mr. Meyer zooms in on it from across the meadow, perhaps some 300 feet or so.
Okay. Guns.
And here's a brief segment of a video in which Marcel Vogel, a high-level, patent-holding IBM scientist, comments on the remarkable metal alloy samples given to him by Meyer, which he has just analyzed.
Marcel Vogel, a senior scientist and chemist with IBM, had been carefully analyzing the tiny metal fragments Semyasa had given Billy. Metallurgical analysis had revealed the presence of the rare earth element thulium, but it was through the lens of a scanning electron microscope that Vogel made his most amazing discoveries.
I could not explain the type of material that I have and its discreteness by any known combination of materials. I could not put it together myself as a scientist. If I were to take these combinations and put it into a furnace, melt it, then pour it out and pull a little ingot, I would see all of these elements present there in any one area. But I don't. I see this discrete bits of material. Now, it can only happen by some form of a cold fusion process where you have the elements present and you fuse them together so they still maintain their identity, but they interpenetrate into one another. It's also a challenge because I showed it to one of my friends who was a metallurgist, and he shook his head. He said, I don't see how it can be put together. And that's where we are right now. And I think it's important that those of us who are in the scientific world sit down and do some serious study on these things instead of putting it off as figments of people's imagination.
Could I say this material is extraterrestrial?
It doesn't look like anything that we've made here. At this moment, I would feel very much inclined to accept what was given to me as being true.
I see.
I respect the people I have met so far, their integrity, their willingness to work. Mr. De La Tosa in his work on photography, and Mr. Stevens, the way he has done his best to give me specimens. We have all done this for one thing, to serve and to find out what truth.
Included with this lecture is a document which gives more information about these scientific experts, the ones who actually examined Meyer's physical evidence. So let's briefly consider the evidence. Meyer took more than 1,200 clear, daytime photos of up to 4 of the UFOs at a time. He took 8mm movie films of up to 3 of the UFOs at a time, and one astounding video. He and his wife recorded the sounds of the UFO on a cassette machine outdoors in front of 15 witnesses. He presented metal alloy samples to a patent-holding IBM scientist for analysis. All of the witnesses who took PSE, or voice stress analysis tests, passed. PSE is a form of lie detection which was used mainly in investigative settings during the last century. There are over 100 witnesses, too, and 4 other photographers of the UFOs. And scientific experts examined and analyzed the evidence in every category and found no indication of hoax or trickery. As a matter of fact, all of the above evidence remains irreproducible to this day. Mr. Meyer has survived 19 documented assassination attempts, an awful lot of trouble to go to in order to get rid of a hoaxer. And there are some further things to consider when evaluating the legitimacy of the Meyer case. Regarding co-conspirators, no one has ever come forward even claiming that they were an accomplice to a hoax. No financial or technological resources were ever found to be available or traced to Meyer to accomplish such a hoax. The very physically challenging environment where these events occurred includes remote, hilly, and mountainous regions through which Meyer often traveled, even in winter, on his moped. Meyer was often carefully observed by his neighbors, who told the investigative team that he was always alone on his moped, with a camera and tripod, but nothing even remotely resembling models or balloons for hoaxing photos. Billy Meyer has been a one-armed man for many years before he took his photos and films, a situation that poses monumental, if not insurmountable, obstacles considering the sheer volume of physical evidence and the transcripts he produced, in addition to all his daily responsibilities to his family and his work. As you think about this and all that follows, you can decide for yourself if the one-armed Meyer has super genius abilities in photography, filmmaking, special effects, video production, sound engineering, digital effects, metallurgy, physics, astronomy, mathematics, mass hypnosis, and clairvoyance, or if his claim of being a genuine contactee is simply the truth. Referring to this case as the Billy Meyer UFO contacts implies that it's about more than just great photo opportunities and irreproducible artifacts. Each of the contact conversations between Meyer and the extraterrestrials were recorded by them and, beginning when he was in his late 30s, were later transmitted back to him by the Pleiarans. All of the contacts occurring before 1975 were referred to by date, while those occurring from January 28, 1975 on were numbered. Using his only hand, he would type them out in German and then publish them. This body of transcripts, which I alluded to before, is known as the contact reports. In the course of their conversations with him, the Pleiarans presented Meyer with specific, accurate, scientific, and world event-related information which he then published, often years before official discovery or occurrence. In other words, he was provided with prophetically accurate information, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can do what I did and use internet search engines to find out if what he published actually occurred, and if so, when. In accordance with the scientific method, you should be able to duplicate my results, which showed that in each and every case, the event occurred, or the scientific information proved accurate, and that Meyer was the first person on record to publish it. Since we'll be speaking about both prophecies and predictions, which are both governed by the laws of cause and effect, it's best to offer these definitions. Prophecies foretell negative events that will occur unless people correct their thinking and their actions to the positive in time to avert or reduce their effects. Predictions refer to events which are said to be unalterable, either because they have their origin in cosmic or natural circumstances outside of our control, like a comet from outer space, or because they are prophesied events that have progressed beyond the point of no return. Let's keep in mind that prophecies and predictions are not the exclusive domain of extraterrestrials, seers, and psychics. Based on our own understanding of cause and effect, we make and often rely on them every day in forecasting the weather, tides, storms, and even earthquakes. We have experts who chart the orbits of planets and asteroids, the trajectories of Earth-launched spacecraft, others who specialize in predicting stock and financial trends, as well as the outcome of sporting events and political elections, all with widely varying degrees of success. However, in addition to employing what we might think of as clairvoyance, the Plejarians claim to use extremely advanced computer calculations and even time travel technology in making their prophecies and predictions. We'll see how well the Plejarians compare with our own experts in foretelling our future. Please note that the Plejarians usually did not give dates for certain prophecies to Meyer because they knew that people would then attempt to alter or interfere with their fulfillment. This approach, they said, would only compound the negativity and damage of such events. But, as has already been stated, they emphasize that humanity can often prevent the negative events or lessen their damage by becoming more reasonable and correcting the thoughts and actions that otherwise lead to negative consequences. I'm going to go over just a few of the dozens of documented examples of this prophetically accurate information that have been found in the more than 2,000 pages of the English translations of the contact reports. More information is available at our website. We'll give that address at the end of the lecture. The concern that the extraterrestrials have regarding our environmental and self-destruction was first expressed to Meyer during a contact on February 4th, 1956, when he was 19 years old. It was here that some of the damage done to the environment, humans, and other life forms by atomic bomb explosions was first mentioned. Specifically, the fact that the atmosphere was greatly disturbed, which would result in climate changes and adverse weather conditions, and lead to genetic mutations in plants and animals as well as humans. In his seventh contact on February 25, 1975, Meyer's primary contact person, named Semyaze, explained the connection between bromine gases and damage to the ozone layer. In 1991, this was announced as a new discovery on NPR, National Public Radio, 16 years after Meyer had published it. During the 35th contact on September 15, 1975, Ptah, Semyaze's father and a leader of the Plejarian race, revealed to Meyer the connection between A-bomb explosions and elementary radiations, which, he said, are electrical energies in the high ultraviolet range currently unknown to our scientists. He explained how this was connected to damage to the ozone layer, magnetic disturbances, displacement of the North and South poles, as well as the destruction of various microorganisms, which also leads to genetic mutations and damage to the food chain. In 1988, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories announced the A-bomb connection to the ozone damage as a new discovery, 13 years after Meyer had already published it. And in 1992, an article appeared in the Los Angeles Times confirming the connection between the ozone hole and genetic mutations and damage to the food chain, Consider that Meyer's contact, where this damage was first mentioned to him, occurred an astonishing 36 years before the Livermore announcement. It was during his 45th contact, on February 25, 1976, that the connection between oil and gas extraction from the Earth and increased earthquake and volcanic activity was explained to Meyer. In 1990, a scientist from Stanford University published an article on this new theory, except it wasn't new to Mr. Meyer, who had published the same information 14 years earlier. On July 7th, and again on July 17, 1975, Meyer was given detailed information about Venus by Semyaze. In August of 1976, Astronomy magazine published information regarding the bases of the cloud banks on Venus being about 40 kilometers above the surface, and showed a cratered surface as well, corroborating exactly what Meyer described on his journey to Venus. Most of the other information about Venus provided by Semyaze, pertaining to temperatures, wind speeds, magnetic field, and composition of gases, as well as coloration of terrain on Venus, have also since been corroborated. In 1981, Stevens and members of the investigative team visited scientists at the USGS who were finishing a terrain map of Venus that conformed to what Meyer had reported 6 years earlier. Stevens wondered how Meyer could have known this information before our own scientists did. Here you see original pages from the English translation of the contact reports that show the conversations regarding Venus. Here's the cover of Wendell's first volume, in which his translation of this contact appears. Here's the copyright page from Wendell's Volume 1. And here are the pages with the information regarding Venus in his corrected English translation. During Meyer's 115th contact on October 19, 1978, while on board a spacecraft with Semyaze, he discussed detailed information regarding Jupiter. Meyer observed the existence of its rings, as well as the moon Europa being encrusted in ice, and Io being the most volcanically active body in the solar system, and also having a relatively smooth surface. In the spring of 2003, I contacted Dr. Joseph Vaverka, chairman of the astronomy department at Cornell University, and told him that a Swiss man had published accurate information on Jupiter, its rings and moons, long before it was known by terrestrial scientists. To his credit, Dr. Vaverka was interested enough to have me forward the information. When I called him about a week later, this is what he said to me regarding Meyer's information about the moon Io being the most volcanically active body in the solar system, and I quote, "If he said that about Io 3 to 6 months before, then all I can say is that he's right." Dr. Vaverka had no comment on Meyer's also stating that Europa was covered in ice and that Jupiter had rings, also 5 months before we discovered these facts. Here's a picture of Europa. But even more stunning was Mayer's description of the rings and their formation, which was primarily due, he said, to dust particles being flung off of Io by the enormous volcanic activity on that moon. Io's relatively smooth surface, which Mayer said was caused in large part by the particulate matter that wasn't taken up into the rings, can be seen in this photo. This photo shows Io and its proximity to Jupiter. It wasn't until 20 years later, in 1998, that scientists from Cornell University announced that they believed that they had discovered the source of the rings, that is, dust particles coming off of Jupiter's moons. The scientists attributed these dust particles to the explosions caused by meteorites hitting the surface of the moons and throwing up dust clouds. My own reasoning told me that Mayer's description was the more logical. While the clouds resulting from the meteorite explosions might throw out some material, there would be no comparison with the enormous explosive and directed propulsive force of numerous huge volcanoes and the immense amount of material spewed forth by them. Mayer said that the velocities of the volcanically ejected material reached 2,300 kilometers per hour, and the material was propelled up to 180 kilometers off of the moon's surface. Here you can see several pages from the original early English translations of the contact reports which pertain to the 115th contact and the information regarding Jupiter. These were available in the early 1980s and contain information that was only verified in 1998. I've also included pages from Wendell Stevens' books with the same contact information in corrected English. And here is the copyright page to Volume 2 of the Contact Reports published by Wendell Stevens. Note that the copyrights originate in 1979, and the latest date is 1990. Shown here are the notes on Jupiter as they appear in Stevens' Volume 2. Now take a moment to contemplate the mind-boggling reality of Mayer publishing dozens of specific, previously unknown information, and especially all of this pertaining to Jupiter. How is it possible for someone to hoax published, accurate scientific information years, even decades in advance? Then consider this. In 1978, in his book, Existing Life in the Universe, Mayer wrote that a new comet would be discovered at the end of the 80s or the beginning of the 90s, that it would be named Tutatis, and that it would threaten the Earth in September 2004. In 1989, French astronomers discovered the comet and named it Tutatis. It is due to pass by Earth on September 29th, 2004. While we contemplate how amazing that is, note that the Plejarians told Mayer that while a definite threat to Earth exists, much can change before 2004, such as the comet being pushed out of its orbit, for example, should we focus our efforts on such matters. A destruction or alteration of the comet's course through detonation of nuclear bombs would also be possible, or the comet might be guided elsewhere through the gravitational influence of the larger planets, and so forth. Mayer has also mentioned that there are two other planets that lie beyond Pluto's orbit. He calls them Trans-Pluto and Uni. He says that someday our scientists will discover them. As remarkable as the preceding may be, consider the following. In early 1979, Stevens accidentally obtained a portion of the 115th contact from one of Mayer's associates, which was not meant for public viewing. This is the same contact from 1978 that contained all of the detailed information on Jupiter, which wouldn't be known until 20 years later in 1998. Amazingly, It also contained information on 9 other specific events which had not yet taken place. When Stevens discovered, upon his return to the States, that he had such a document, he contacted 2 trusted associates, Major Rudolph Pestalozzi, retired, and O. Richard Norton, former director of the Flandreau Planetarium in Tucson, Arizona, both of whom witnessed the document along with Stevens before it was put away for safekeeping until after all of these events had occurred. These are those events: the Jonestown Massacre, the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the Chinese invasion of North Vietnam, the death of Tito, Mount St. Helens eruption, the abdication of the Queen of Holland, the death of Indira Gandhi, the terrorist attack on the Iranian embassy in London. I should also mention that dozens more specific, prophetically accurate examples exist in the contact reports, which are still in German and have not been translated yet into English. Some of the most disturbing prophecies, which were given to Meyer in 1987, have recently been fulfilled before our very eyes. At his 215th contact, on February 28, 1987, Meyer was forewarned about the destruction of the World Trade Center by terrorists, which the whole world witnessed on September 11, 2001. In the same contact, subsequent American attacks on other countries were also predicted, 2 of which have, so far, been already carried out in Afghanistan and Iraq. Amazingly, during this contact, the near nuclear exchange between Pakistan and India was also foretold, years before either country actually even possessed nuclear weapons. This near exchange occurred in 2002. And in Contact 251, a lengthy document authored by Meyer himself and presented to the Pleiarans to review for accuracy before he published it in 1995, we find these even more recently fulfilled events. The stunning U.S. attack on Iraq, which occurred in 2003. The following increase in Islamic attacks, which have also occurred in 2002 and 2003. The spread of mad cow disease to other animals and humans that Meyer predicted has also recently occurred, has been corroborated in both 2002 and 2003. Meyer also foretold a new disease and epidemic, SARS, which began in 2003. And the news has been filled recently with increased public concerns about chemical weapons, just as Meyer wrote about it in 1995. Amazingly, from this same 251st contact, Meyer warned of the danger of a French nuclear power plant accident near Lyon, France, exactly where it was reported to have almost occurred during the heat wave of August 2003. Since we can only determine if the case is true or not on the basis of the evidence, we should note that all of the previously discussed prophetic material has been shown to be astoundingly accurate. It is contained in copyrighted documents and books that were published before these events occurred. Let me once again point out that even setting aside the translations of the contact reports from Switzerland that were first available in English in the early 1980s, Stevens' books still absolutely prove that the information on Jupiter was published a minimum of 8 years before it was officially discovered. No wonder the professional skeptics and debunkers who've completely failed to duplicate any of Meyer's physical evidence or prove it a hoax have given up attacking the case. How are they supposed to explain copyrighted, published documents and books containing accurate, specific scientific information years and even decades in advance? This is clearly irrefutable legal proof of authenticity. Now, it's also appropriate to consider the following information to be purely speculative, unless and until it is proven to be either false or accurate. However, based on the existing record of impeccable prophetic accuracy, we are compelled to seriously consider these very discomforting prophecies with a strong sense of urgency. And they include the fall of England, Islamic extremists overrunning France and much of Europe, France, Iran, Turkey, Norway, and Sweden being invaded by Russia, the fall of the Catholic Church and only 2 popes remaining after John Paul II, war between France and Spain, a massive Chinese weapons of mass destruction attack on New Delhi, India, a Third World War following 2 years after the deaths of 4 heads of state, all occurring within a 7-day period. No, we're not necessarily doomed. We're forewarned, and that means we're forearmed. And while praise for humanity is decidedly missing from the information, there is an important exception to the ominous and negative prophecies. On a more hopeful note, according to Meyer, should we survive, it is in the centuries to come that women shall finally attain their rightful status. These true mothers of the millennium will take the destiny of mankind into their hands and create a world without fear of misery, suffering, and wars, a world in which peace, freedom, love, and harmony will finally reign. Accompanying the prophecy regarding a Third World War, we are warned that the potential consequences of allowing such a war to occur would include the loss of 2/3 of humanity, billions of people, with radioactive contamination lasting for decades, if not centuries. There would be dreadful genetic mutations, monstrous birth defects, and incurable diseases, along with widespread food shortages and worldwide environmental devastation of unimaginable proportions. The destructive impact of such a war on America and the entire Northern Hemisphere would exceed even our worst nightmares. As stated before, the Pleiadians operate outside of any obligations to or controlled by any of our world's governmental, military, political, religious, or economic systems or powers. Understandably, this is perceived as a threat to our power structures and explains the official denial of UFOs and the Pleiadians in particular. The Pleiadians play this game by their own rules simply because they can. They have the power and position to do so, something which we surely can relate to, since that's how we do things here on Earth, though for far less altruistic reasons. While specifically warning of the dangers of Islamic fanaticism and international terrorism, the Pleiadians and Meyer have had plenty of criticism for numerous countries and individuals. So, in the spirit of being equal opportunity offenders, they have not shied away from harsh criticism of U.S. policies and the threat they pose not only to world peace, but to the safety and survival of America as well. The Pleiadians have specifically warned that the U.S. should dramatically alter its military policies, withdraw its armed forces from all foreign countries, cease to act as the world's policeman, and stop interfering in the affairs of and committing unprovoked military aggression against other countries. Should the citizens of the U.S. not succeed in leading and compelling their government to make these important policy changes, the inevitable consequences will ultimately be, in their words, enormous devastation, destruction, and annihilation in the USA. Again, their words, not mine. The universal laws of cause and effect and the horrendous outcome they dictate are not negated or overcome by individual or collective denial. Only by changing our thoughts and actions to a truly positive direction now can we avert such unimaginable devastation later. The Plejarians have a documented track record of unprecedented accuracy for more than 30 years. So, unpleasant as this information may be, we are the only ones in a position to change it for the better if we have the will to do so. To assist us to effectively counterbalance these dire warnings about the future, the Plejarians enumerated specific, universal core principles and guidelines for us to act upon and embody in our daily lives, if we truly wish to survive and make real progress. What follows is but a brief overview of some of these core principles. Since some of these core principles may seem familiar or even obvious, we have to ask ourselves, why then do we have to be reminded again? Perhaps if we'd done more than pay lip service to the real moral and ethical standards and values espoused by wise men and women throughout the ages, we wouldn't need this wake-up call, and our world wouldn't be in such enormous turmoil and danger. Many of us have also become lost in the pursuit of the excessively unnecessary, as well as the unnecessarily excessive. We've abdicated our personal and collective responsibilities and allowed the least wise, most power-hungry so-called leaders to set us on a course of global destruction, often in the name of peace, freedom, liberation, or divine will. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth, as we may end up learning all too late. Since true change doesn't come from the top down, we must change by aligning ourselves with and embodying the higher positive principles. Then we must lead the leaders. Let's consider a few of the pivotal principles the Plejarians recommend for personal and societal development. Each individual must bear complete responsibility for his or her own thinking, feelings, and actions. No one else is responsible for us. Only by becoming self-responsible do we become truly free and happy. And then, by becoming a living example for others, we can help to gradually change the world for the better. We must be honest and truthful. This is a logical, practical, and positive form of self-interest, as well as a necessity. Lying only temporarily delays and ultimately compounds the inevitable negative consequences of not being truthful. The Plejarians' very direct, often harsh-sounding language expresses the truth as they know it. And they equate the kind of diplomatic and political language that proliferates on earth with lying. Each and every human being also has the responsibility to grow in spiritual wisdom and understanding through their own work and efforts. While much can be learned from others, the Plejarians emphasize that absolutely no intermediaries, such as priests, ministers, rabbis, gurus, masters, etc., are needed in order to attain connection to the eternal source of all life and existence that they call the creation. Praying to the creation to change things or to intervene in one's life is also considered illogical, since it implies that the error lies with the creation, with life itself, and not with the individual. Since mistakes and even misfortunes are a natural and necessary part of life and learning, it is wiser to pray inwardly to awaken one's own spiritual strength and capacity to deal with adversities and to cultivate the wisdom that can be learned from one's experiences. Consciously seeking true spiritual knowledge and enduring values over the ceaseless pursuit of materialism, money, and power frees us and leads to recognizing creation-given evolution as the highest goal and meaning of life. In order to progress towards the good and positive, we must leave behind false hopes and desires and develop neutral positive thinking, which requires that we first see things as they really are, not as we wish them to be. Only then can we clearly choose what we do prefer. The Pleiadians have stated that both positive and negative thinking lead to negative results, and that only neutral positive thinking leads to positive results. Each one of us is also required to become self-supporting for our own food, shelter, clothing, training, education, and all other needs. Even at the presumably high levels of technological and spiritual development attained by the Pleiadians, each of the members of their societies, including their leaders, are required to perform a certain amount of work every day as their contribution to their society. They advocate that here too, on earth, each individual should engage in sufficient manual labor in order to attain balance in pursuing spiritual development. All of this will require the utmost honesty and objectivity in both individual and national self-reflection, something which, arguably, we in America almost pride ourselves on avoiding. But wherever we may live, if we think of our country as a very large family and apply the same standards of conduct and behavior that we would apply to our own families and ourselves, we would see just how foolish it is to blindly defend everything that's done in our country's name. If it's pointed out to you that someone in your family did something quite wrong or behaved unacceptably, would you criticize and attack the person who told you about it? Would you defend the wrong that had been committed by saying, well, this is our family, so whatever we do is above reproach or criticism? If that's unacceptable in your own family, then why is it acceptable in our national family, where the consequences are far greater and affect the lives of millions, perhaps billions of people? And though it doesn't take an extraterrestrial to point out that humanity is rapidly going down the wrong road in the wrong direction, the fact that we are being warned by those with an impeccable track record of accuracy and no discernible hidden agenda should add additional weight and urgency to the wake-up call. In comparison, can you think of even one political or governmental leader in your country who has unfailingly told the truth for the past 30 years, or a prognosticator whose projections and predictions have all been shown to be accurate, even decades into the future? We cannot rely on our politicians, governments, leaders, or the media for the truth. We need to demand and find out the truth for ourselves. It makes sense that only mature, self-responsible people coming together can truly effect positive change in the world. And we do that not by preaching, but by teaching, by example, by how we live. We, here on Earth, inhabit what amounts to a tiny speck of cosmic lint, floating through an incomprehensibly vast and perfectly functioning universe, a universe about which we know so very little. The Pleiadians have offered their perspective on a number of concepts, which can help us to become aware of a much bigger picture of reality than we currently are aware of or accept. It is clear from what they have said and how they've said it in the contact reports that they only speak in terms of what they know or don't know, not in terms of what they may or may not believe. So, while most of what follows is still speculative, as far as we're concerned, to them it is true and factual. The creation is the term that the Pleiadians use to refer to the omnipotent, ever-evolving, intelligent universe in which we all live, both the source and the sustenance for all life and all that exists in this universe. The Pleiadians state that there are an uncountable number of universes already in existence, and that all universes evolved from the original, self-created creation called the Absolute Absolutum. The creation is the embodiment of all wisdom, love, knowledge, understanding, justice, and perfection. Everything is within the creation, and the creation is within everything. The creation has no deities, no chosen people, no only begotten Son, and no solitary prophet. It has created no hells or threats of damnation, and has never commanded brother to kill brother. The creation answers no prayers and takes no sides in football games or wars. The creation knows no vengeance and creates through love, not fear. While they may contain some creational truths, none of the religions are complete and accurate, and all have been adulterated by human influence. The creation doesn't require religions, cults, sects, beliefs, rituals, sacrifices, coercion, or abasement of self or others. We are encouraged to look for and see the creation in everything, in all people and things, and to observe nature to better understand its workings and its laws. The creation too must evolve, and we humans contribute not only to our own evolution, but to that of the creation as well. Seeking to know and understand the creation and its laws is one of the deepest purposes of life. The law of cause and effect is an immutable law of the universe, which explains how most of what seemingly happens to us, both the positive and the negative, actually depends on the choices we make and the actions we take. It has been expressed also as the familiar "do unto others as you would have them do unto you," and "you will reap what you sow." As a law, it is neither mystical nor religious, but purely logical and enduring. Being conscious of our thoughts and actions brings us into greater understanding of cause and effect. The Pleiadians say that the human spirit is the immortal, individual, holographic spark of the creation that dwells within each and every human being in the universe. It is in itself a perfectly balanced embodiment of both the positive and negative, and humans, as we develop throughout life, express and experience attributes of both of these polarities. The spirit is erroneously referred to as the soul in various religions and belief systems, but according to the Pleiadians, the soul, which isn't immortal, is more accurately known as the psyche, and is located in the area of the solar plexus, hence its name. Being an evolving aspect of the creation itself, the human spirit, and consequently human beings, are neither fallen, nor born in sin, nor otherwise inherently guilty of anything. According to the Pleiadians, humans live countless millions of lives in the process of their spirit's evolution to the highest levels of spiritual development, and ultimately merging and entering into co-creation with the creation. Knowledge and awareness of one's past lives are not generally available to people until they reach a much higher level of evolution and are equipped to handle the information maturely. In each lifetime, the personality is entirely different than any of the previous ones and has different lessons to learn and problems to solve. The Pleiadians also state that the common understanding of the term karma is incorrect. We are neither rewarded nor punished for our behaviors in past lives, as each life is completed with its positive and negative experiences. On the other hand, the accumulated experiences, learning, and wisdom from each life are retained in the subconscious and can often be developed and brought forth in subsequent lives. If we had a slogan for reincarnation, it might read, "Reincarnation. Don't worry about dying. You'll live through it." After death, we are not judged by the creation, but, in effect, we judge ourselves. While mistakes and errors are an intrinsic part of human life, judgment is ultimately made and the consequences borne by the individual, not imposed or rendered by any deities or gods. And the path of human evolution is such that humans are also never in need of salvation, absolution, or redemption by any external forces. The High Council consists of extremely advanced beings in the Andromeda Galaxy who, through countless millions of lifetimes, over billions of years, have attained semi-material or purely spiritual forms, and from whom the Pleiarans receive advice and guidance, which they are free to consider without obligation. Over many millennia, the Pleiarans, whose own ancestors began traveling through space millions of years ago, have encountered millions of human races in a myriad variety of colors, forms, shapes, and levels of development, all throughout this universe, which is simply teeming with life. Both positive and negative space-traveling races exist, as well as various federations and alliances of like-minded beings. If we survive these perilous times, we will also encounter many other space-traveling extraterrestrial races, both the benevolent and malevolent. The Pleiarans emphasize that we will have to mature enormously and greatly temper our aggressive nature, or we will come out on the losing end of encounters with far more powerful races that will not tolerate any attempts by us at conquest or domination. It is certainly not too soon to recognize that not only are we not alone, we are very far from being anything close to the most advanced or powerful beings inhabiting this universe. In presenting us with hidden aspects of humanity's true history, the Pleiarans have said much about the genetic manipulations that were done to our ancient forefathers, who had been bred to be a warrior race millions of years ago in the Sirian star system, long before they were brought to this solar system. The purposeful effect of these manipulations was to limit their lifespans to approximately 100 years and to increase their propensity for aggression and fighting. Over the course of countless centuries, every single human being on Earth has inherited both of these genetic manipulations. The aging gene, as it is called, is referred to as the true original sin by the Pleiarans, a sin not on our part, but against all of terrestrial humanity that they say is certain to be reversed in time. They also say that we shall attain ever longer lifespans, much the same as they and other extraterrestrial humans enjoy. This, along with the positive modification of the aggression gene, will also allow us to attempt longer journeys into outer space as we evolve in our space-traveling technological capabilities. And while we need to reduce our aggressive tendencies, we're also told that we must not get rid of them completely, as a certain amount of fighting spirit is necessary for survival, even for space-traveling races. Information in greater detail about the genetic manipulations can be found in the 251st Contact, available at a website link in the appendix. Contrary to what some people think, genetic engineering holds the promise of enormous benefit in terms of food quality, availability, and nutrition. It isn't a diabolical evil, but an inevitable scientific development that, like everything in life, holds certain dangers and can be misused. Carefully watched and properly applied genetic engineering can help solve many food problems, like those affecting vegetarians who often don't get the necessary nutrients currently available only from animal-based foods. The Pleiarans grow cultured meat in a way similar to how we culture certain foods like tofu. Without having to harm any animals, they produce foods which have the same essential nutrients and the tastes they prefer, something that would solve many ethical as well as nutritional problems for us. Of course, we've eaten genetically engineered foods for decades. Have you ever had a nectarine, for example? But even beyond food engineering, the technology for robots, androids, semi-organic life forms, and things which once seemed to belong exclusively to the realm of science fiction have not only been developed and applied by the Pleiarans, but in the course of evolution will be available to us as well. Contemplate and think about these things. Question them. Struggle with them. And consider that there is a universe of possibilities and wonders beyond our wildest dreams and current level of awareness, yet we preoccupy ourselves with destroying and dominating each other and our planet. Do we want to remain enslaved by the limiting, futile thinking, the shams and charades that pass for meaningful existence? Or do we want to become aware of our place in the grand scheme of things, with awe and reverence, with gratitude for the enormous miracle of life itself? Could it be that making more war doesn't create more peace? Could it be that it usually just creates more war? Haven't we had enough yet of the wars, the terror, the polarization, entombed in primitive fear-based belief systems that keep people at each other's throats? If we are to evolve, we have work to do. If we are inspired by the possibilities, if we feel a renewed enthusiasm to live deep and meaningful lives, we have to act now, that we may one day enjoy the unbounded freedom that can be ours as true, responsible, universal citizens. To that end, we are encouraged to restore genuine leadership. Contrary to our current trends and values, it is not those who have attained high rank and status in the various political, economic, scientific, military, material, and financial matters that we should emulate. Foreign as this concept may seem, it is the true sages and philosophers who should be sought to instruct the people in the higher values. Ultimately, this leadership must be non-political in nature, meaning that it must be based not on the self-serving, divisive, and advantage-oriented premises of virtually all political systems, but embody the kinds of core principles and universal truths that offer genuine equal opportunity for the well-being of all peoples. It is essential to establish true peace and end all aggression. The worldwide war industry must be entirely dismantled and its ravenous financial waste redirected for the true well-being of the people. Love, peace, and freedom must prevail for all people, regardless of faith, color, or race, without prejudice or violence. Both torture and the death penalty must be permanently abolished worldwide, and legal protection ensured for the soundness of the body and psyche. Real, permanent, lifelong banishment for convicted capital offenders, murderers, child molesters, rapists, etc., provides protection for the society, as well as the opportunity for atonement, repentance, and genuine understanding for the offenders, should they take that opportunity. The Pleiadians have stated that in accordance with the law of reincarnation, to terminate the life of a capital offender is not only detrimental to his or her own spiritual development, but poses long-term dangers to the society as a whole, since it virtually assures a repeat of violent tendencies in the next incarnation. There is a publication available that delves even more deeply into the compelling reasons to abolish capital punishment and torture. It is absolutely necessary for the peace and stability of the planet to control births and population growth. Much information from the Pleiadians, Meyer, and other terrestrial sources has been published showing how great the actual damage to our world is from overpopulation. Overpopulation is directly connected to strife, famine, wars, environmental destruction, illegal immigration, and degradation. In order to fully appreciate the scope of the problem, it is necessary to look carefully at the research. There must be sufficient worldwide food production and distribution to end hunger and starvation. There must be an immediate end to the financially motivated, criminal, and insane destruction of food supplies. All of the profit-greedy, criminal, and irresponsible persons must be held accountable through just and appropriate leadership. With the widespread corruption and criminality that extends into almost every level of society and government, it might seem like an overwhelming task to rectify such gross offenses and deal firmly with the perpetrators. Again, the laws of cause and effect cannot be fooled. So we must roll up our collective sleeves and get about the business of cleaning up the mess that has occurred on our watch. The positive application of science is required for the cultivation and preservation of all environmental concerns regarding the land, air, and water. The responsible stewardship of the earth is fully in our own best interests, but eco-terrorism and other forms of violence must never be a part of the approach. The time has come for us to recognize that we are neither the only, nor certainly the most advanced human life forms in the universe. An open-minded examination of the reported sightings of unknown craft by literally millions of people worldwide, and their depiction in artwork over the centuries, should be sufficient to at least allow for the possibility that there are other intelligent and more technologically and spiritually advanced beings in the universe. There are also these essential elements to incorporate into our comprehensive global restructuring. There must be a true worldwide armed peacekeeping force operating under international law, drawn equally from and equally protective of all nations, enforcing the laws and peace equally for all peoples. No nation would be exempt from enforcement of international law because of power or influence. This global force would be authorized to pursue and apprehend criminals, terrorists, and violent revolutionaries, and bring them before the international court. If, in the course of apprehending them, the criminal elements offered armed resistance, then the peace combat troops would be within their rights to respond with armed force and would be held blameless for the deaths of the resistors. This is a very different, more humane and moral approach than indiscriminately bombing and attacking the civilian population of a country and inflicting brutality and devastation upon it. On a personal and global level, we need to realize and affirm that self-defense is not only a right, it is a responsibility. The Plejarians, who are not pacifists but only use force in self-defense, maintain that it is a spiritual crime to let oneself be victimized in the name of pacifism. They point out that all creatures in nature are equipped with a means to defend themselves or to escape danger, and humans are unique in the variety of offensive and defensive means at their disposal. True international law must be adhered to by all nations, with no exceptions or veto powers for the more powerful. All international criminals, terrorists, and war makers apprehended by the combat peace force are to be brought before such a court for trial and punishment. Nuclear technology is so toxic that the negative effects, that is, genetic mutations, diseases, planetary imbalances, atmospheric disturbances, etc., will still last for generations to come. It is in humanity's own vital interests to eliminate such technology and replace it with non-toxic, non-polluting sources. When people leave their homelands solely for economic advantage, they only help to perpetuate the problems in their home countries, delaying the necessary reforms, while the new host country suffers damage from the imbalance as well. Further, it should be self-evident that the problems they create and the drain upon the host society are beyond their ability to rectify, as is evidenced by their inability to have done so in their own countries. It must be understood that recognizing the truth of the situation is a matter of principle and doesn't reflect on the other positive human qualities that the illegal immigrants may possess. But they too bear the responsibility for correcting the errors and injustices in their own countries, so as to raise the quality of life for themselves and their fellow countrymen. A people can and must employ the best means possible, learning by example and modeling the values and standards of the countries they would emulate, rather than simply trying to live off of the economic wealth of those countries. Otherwise, strife, conflict, lowered standards of living, and even civil war may result. There must be a cessation of oil extraction, the building of dams, and all overbuilding, as these all create great planetary imbalances that lead to increased earthquake and volcanic activity. This in turn leads to a weakening of the Earth's ability to absorb shocks from an asteroid or other extraplanetary body striking the surface, as must inevitably occur. Since the petroleum also acts as a shock absorber for the plates of the Earth, removing it leaves us vulnerable to large-scale damage that would otherwise not occur. The Pleiadians long ago dissolved all divisive, self-serving, advantage-seeking political parties and elevated the most spiritually evolved individuals to positions of leadership. This may seem impossible considering how addicted we are to turning over our power to charismatic, power-seeking personalities and predictable political charades. Consider how their voting system works. For each issue to be voted on, the facts are presented to everybody in a neutral pro and con way. And 3 hours later, the entire planetary population votes on the issue. There is no discussion of the issue in advance. This means that the individual has the responsibility to actually think the issues through for him or herself and to make their decision accordingly. While abortion is permitted, presumably by natural herbal means, it is allowed only up until the 21st day after conception in their societies, since the Pleiadians know, from utilizing their advanced sciences, that the human spirit attaches to the embryo at that time. For the Pleiadians, any abortion performed after this time would be considered murder. Since we don't have the scientific means yet to prove or disprove the existence of the human spirit, we are still polarized by and somewhat at the mercy of conflicting belief systems. The Pleiadians are telling us the truth as they know it. They aren't concerned about either pleasing or offending anyone, certainly not us. They know that it is only the truth, and not nice flowery words, that awaken and help people, harsh as it may often seem. And the fact that they have chosen to contact us and impart their information through a seemingly obscure and simple individual who doesn't seek celebrity or financial gain is paradoxically the reason why we've even heard about these contacts in the first place. More than once it has been made clear that this isn't really about UFOs and extraterrestrials, that it's about our future and our survival. It doesn't take an extraterrestrial to realize that we have given up our individual and collective responsibility to outside political, governmental, and military forces, as well as to religious, corporate, economic, and media influences. The Pleiadians are encouraging us to rapidly, conscientiously clean up our act for our own sakes. If we choose to destroy ourselves, no one will interfere. They say that would only occur if we were on the verge of blowing up our planet, as happened once before in our solar system long ago. As mentioned earlier, the remnants of that planet, that testament to human folly and megalomania, now circle in the asteroid belt. No one, no president, leader, presumed God, angel, master, extraterrestrial, or what have you, can or is going to save us from the consequences of our own actions. No one can but us. You've seen and heard the abundant, incontrovertible evidence, including the still irreproducible photos and films, the video, sound recordings, the metal alloy samples. You've looked at the copyrighted, irrefutable legal proof, and the stunningly accurate prophetic information. Now it's time to answer the 3 questions that I said I'd ask at the end of this presentation. Based on what you've learned here, number 1, is this true? Number 2, what do I do about it? Number 3, what do we do about it together? we've received abundant, credible warnings about what awaits us if we don't change our course in a big way. And we've been given specific, time-tested measures, core principles, and universal truths to help us implement such a change. Do we have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the minds to reason? Most importantly, do we have the will to do what must be done individually and collectively? Do we prefer this or this? Do we want to have this or this? If we recognize that we do have so much to live for, then the time to act, to upgrade our personal and communal code, is now. This is a spiritual challenge. It has absolutely nothing to do with joining UFO cults or sects of any kind, nor with promises of heaven or threats of hell. There are no belief systems, dogmas, hierarchies, or rituals to embrace. This is about an inner and outer search for truth that will bring us into conflict with the limitations of the materialistic, false values that currently dominate our world. In order to become what the Plejarians refer to as real and true human beings, we must awaken and unite as free individuals, taking full responsibility for our lives in order to fulfill our highest and truest destiny. To thrive, we must survive. And how to do that is what this is all about.
We got friends from outer space. They come here from a distant place, and it's all right. Mad, malevolent human race, throwing that hate all over the place, and it's so wrong. Salome, sunrises, may they always be. Salome, sunrises, may they always be, till mankind realizes. Salome. An ancient Aryan phrase, helping us realize peace and grace, and it's all ours. A spiritual awareness must prevail, or the risk that life on earth will fail, and that's too bad. Salome, sunrises, may they always be. Salome, sunrises, may they always be, till mankind realizes. Salome, sunrises, may they always be. Salome sunrises, may they always be, till mankind realizes. Salome, Salome, Salome sunrises, may they always